I want to address whatever this thing is. You know what? Let's address Kara first. Kara, I know that what you're doing right now, I know you think it's fun. I know you think it's exciting. I know you think you're free. And you're doing what you think you want to do. And for the first time in your life, you don't have mom and dad looking over you and protecting you with rules, not holding you down with rules, but protecting you with rules in the same way that God protects us. That was me about 2 weeks ago when my oldest daughter decided to leave home at 17 to be with a boy that she likes and his mom. My wife and I gave this girl the world. She was loved, cared for. She always had an open line of communication to us, whether she chose to use it or not. We did weekly family Bible studies in the home most weeks, on top of all the individual conversations we would have about biblical principles and the influences of the world. We were laughing, cutting up, playing games, and enjoying one another's company right up until the moment she left. We were not perfect parents by any means to her, but we were good parents to her. We had zero idea that anything was wrong. She had been lying to our faces for months. The only legitimate charge that she had against us was that we wanted her and this boy that she liked to hang out at our house some while we were getting to know him. And then the boy's mom wouldn't let him because she was afraid that we would indoctrinate him with our emphasis on biblical principles and on godly living. She changed her phone number, she emptied her bank accounts, she cut off every family member, her sisters, and every friend that she's ever had. And she did this to the point that she will not talk to or respond to any of us. This has obviously been an immense trial for my family. I have tried writing a dozen different episodes for this channel since she left, and I can't seem to focus on anything but the trial and the grief that we're going through right now. So rather than trying to fight against it, I'm going to embrace it and do an extended series on living in light of our completed new hearts in the midst of trial. A lot of times when I'm making this content, the best results come from the stuff that I'm currently working through myself in my own life. So I hope this will be a blessing to me and my family, but also a blessing to you as I kind of pull back the curtain to our lives and invite you in on this journey. Today on New Heart Life, I'm discussing the reason for this series on trials, the parents of a fresh prodigal. I'm Kevin Lehman, and I'm a pastoral counselor in Wilmington, North Carolina. I hope you enjoy the show. The past 2 weeks have been the toughest of my life, and I have had some tough weeks. I have recognized my greatest fear, like truly my greatest fear. I had just been in New York the weekend before Kara left, and I was talking to my daughters on the phone, and I was telling them goodnight while we were on this Uber ride. And I can't remember how we got on the topic, but one of them asked me what my greatest fear was. They made some jokes about silly things, spiders, running out of milk, etc. And I never actually revealed to them my greatest fear because I didn't want to put that weight on them. But the guys that I was with in the Uber, when I got off the phone, they asked me, well, what is your greatest fear? And I told them, literally just days before my girl left, that my greatest fear was that I would lose one of my children. Now, by God's grace, I have not yet lost her permanently, but I am very much experiencing that gut-wrenching loss of her presence right now. My wife and I are processing the loss in very different ways, which we've had to talk about with one another and to understand one another. Katie often finds herself dwelling in sadness and fixating on just the hope that she will eventually return home. And then I, on the other hand, am trapped in this just constant cycle of emotions, of sadness and grief that turns into confusion, that turns into anger, and then back to sadness again. Some days I miss my little girl so much, and I just want to drive up there where she is and rescue her from the dangerous and manipulative situation that she's in. Other days, I'm confused and I drive myself crazy trying to think of all the things I could have done differently that may have prevented her from leaving. And then I have these spurts of anger that come later where I hate how she just dropped this hand grenade on her family, on her friends, and on her church, and then walked out the door and left us to pick up the pieces. I'm certainly angry at the mother of this boy for digging her hooks into my daughter and poisoning her mind against everyone who's ever loved her. And there's so much more that goes into this, and I have an extended hour-plus long video that I've made, that's where that very first clip came from, that explains all the elements at play here. It's very emotional, it's very raw, and it includes one of the most important aspects of this, the spiritual warfare aspect. Now, I decided not to make that one public because there's sensitive information in it that I just really don't want out there on a grand scale. But if you're interested in seeing it, send me an email at the address in the description with who you are and why you'd like to see the video, and I will gladly send you a link so that you can view it. But as far as this new series goes, there's a collection of passages that I've used in past counseling situations to help people with trials and suffering, and even anxiety over potential trials and suffering. And while we've had our share of trials, I always felt like I was somewhat counseling these biblical truths from a place of theory rather than experience. Like, of course, the truths of Scripture make sense in their application to trial, and we hope they will be true when the trial comes, but we don't really know until we walk through it. Now, having walked through close to the worst trial I could have imagined, I want to study through these passages of Scripture and evaluate them in light of my new painful reality. I want to see if they really stick. So, are Christians really called to suffer? Is it true that God uses suffering to shape us into His likeness? Would we ever call suffering a gift from God? When Jesus told Paul, "My grace is sufficient for you, and my power is perfected in weakness," did He really mean it? And what does that even really mean? And does that truth really hold when it's tough, when the going gets tough? Jesus tries to shift the rich young ruler's thinking away from material gain and comfort to a life of discipleship and sacrifice. Why would He do that? When Peter says that Christ will restore us after momentary bouts with suffering, does he mean there's literally a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak? Can we count on this restoration? What will that look like? When will it come? Who is this God of all comfort Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians? Why does it feel sometimes like He is anything but that? How do we trust Him even when it hurts? Sometimes the life of Job feels like a common cliche used to address suffering in Christians' lives. Is there really anything practical that we can gain from his story? When we look at Paul's life and we see a man who is afflicted at every corner, but he also says that he has not been destroyed, what does that mean? How in the world is he still standing? What's his secret? And finally, what hope does the Scripture offer specifically? Does the Bible offer hope to my specific suffering, or does it only speak in generalities? And so that's it. That's where we're headed. My family is hurting right now. We have been sustained thus far and even strengthened in unsuspecting ways. It's like a friend of mine pointed out the other day that I have been under attack a lot in my life. God has always been faithful. I can't look back at a single trial and say, I wish that didn't happen. But this will be our toughest one yet. Does Scripture hold up to its promises? We're going to find out. I'm pretty sure I know where we're headed. Please pray for my family. That's all I've got for today. If you're still with me at this point, I have to assume this has been helpful to you. If you'd like to see future content from me as well as support the channel, a subscribe or a like would go a long way. And if you're new here, welcome. Please consider staying and watching some of my other content. There's genuinely some good stuff in there. Thank you so much for listening, and God bless.